Hello, I'm Yam, and we are all in hell. At least that's what it feels like since Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's draft opinion was leaked regarding a majority Supreme Court ruling overturning the super precedent set by the 1973 Roe v. Wade case. Now, the impact of overturning Roe and other details that become apparent with further analysis of the draft are overarching and potentially devastating for those whose due process rights under the 5th and 14th Amendment have been the only things preventing state legislatures from being weaponized against your right to privacy and autonomy. But that's something that warrants a deeper look into. Today, I want to make a specific point to make a clear statement about the pro-life movement whose conviction, including the conviction of the Supreme Court's Bible-thumping supermajority, has made this attack on women's rights possible. Being pro-life is a political position, not a scientific position. Now, reproductive rights have been a political issue for over half a century. Roe v. Wade was never unilaterally agreed upon by the American people, although throughout the American public, a woman's right to choose is more popular than ever and is the majority of people, fun fact. But in reality, the pro-life perspective uses biology as a guise for an ethics argument. It's grounded by religion more often than not, if we're just being honest here. Even if there is a larger consensus in the scientific community on one side than the other, that pregnancy is far too complex of a process to safely take away the options for at-risk pregnancies or expect people to detect pregnancy at the onset of a fetal heartbeat, the philosophy of science is still rooted in argument and using objective data to support an expert opinion. Enter Descartes' theory of doubt. But let's be honest here. Most of us are not biologists or OBGYNs. This is a philosophical argument about when life begins and the ethics of human rights. So, scientifically speaking, cells both make up all living things, but also are living things, right? Including the ovum and the sperm, the reproductive cells of humans. So, of course, a zygote or fertilized ovum is a living diploid cell made of two combined cells, but not necessarily a living human. But the pro-life position is not that we constantly have babies inside of us with our living reproductive cells that are constantly within us, or else they wouldn't support the death penalty, right? That would be murdering so many babies. It's that the second these two cells bind to each other, a process that thousands of other animals go through for reproduction, it's now a living human. Enter Charlie Kirk. Is this a human? This is a dolphin fetus clip.
Do you truly, in your heart of hearts, truly believe that this is a human being?
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt?
Yes.
This is a dolphin fetus.
So let me.
Without a doubt, a dolphin fetus is a human being.
Now, pardon my French, but eggs and cummies? No person. Zygote made out of the same two eggs and cummies? Without any cellular development? That's a motherfucking baby, and if anything happens to it, you're a murderer, I swear to God, I'll waterboard you like it's raped, god damn it. So, as a philosophical or political argument, science, as usual, is far more detailed than it is convenient to solely represent a single argument and say, I win because science. But that hasn't stopped pro-life people from saying that the woke mob doesn't understand basic biology, which don't even get me started on the other topic that conservatives think biology is on their side on. But regardless of what scientific data or knowledge is provided to us, it is up to us as people with abstract thinking to best use that information to seek truth or do the right thing. It's what separates us from computers. It's what makes scientists and the philosophers before them oh so important. With that in mind, what is a far more superior argument regarding reproductive health is that it's similar to all other healthcare and should be treated as a human right. So that's already kind of a pipe dream, hoping we can have universal access to healthcare, right? So, when thinking about abortion as basic healthcare, it's important to remember that even when abortion is banned or prohibited or made illegal in any way or any form, it doesn't actually reduce the number of abortions, only the amount of safe abortions, and instead leads to back alley abortions. Because when you can't truly take away autonomy from a person, and women have to go through these experiences, and they're going to make the decisions that are best for them. And the best thing we can do is allow them to make safe decisions. It's also important to remember that many of the conservatives in your state legislature or those in the Supreme Court, if their child, of their daughter has an unwanted pregnancy, they're going to get an abortion. No matter what their pro-life stance is, people with the means to will always have access to abortions. These bans at the state level are solely going to not solely, but primarily going to negatively impact poor women who don't have the funds to get to a state in which it's legal to have an abortion. Because there's always going to be states where it's going to be legal to have abortion, because this decision is solely going to put it into the state's hands, which is not a good thing. It takes away the federal protection for their human rights. But, if the daughter of a southern state senator wants an abortion, she's going to go to California and get an abortion. It's once again mostly going to negatively impact the poor and minorities who are disproportionately affected by poverty. But I have a surprise for you that's not actually a surprise at all. And it's that these pro-lifers that are overwhelmingly conservative are also hypocrites.
NANI?
Now, anti-abortion and anti-contraceptive legislation is being pushed forward by the same people that are anti-Me Too, pro-cop, pro-death penalty, and pro-draconian prison measures. Now, why is that significant? Because all of those are things that directly go against the values in which they state they believe in for every human life. The sanctity and dignity of all human lives, right? I bring up pro-cop. Think of Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice was a child who was murdered by police for having a toy gun. But did you see these same people stand in opposition to over-policing black neighborhoods and police brutality? No. Maybe when Tamir Rice was an embryo and he got aborted, they would be like, oh no, the child was murdered. But Tamir Rice was literally murdered by a police officer with a firearm. And, maybe you should have complied. And don't forget how we need to slash taxes. And where could that tax funding be going towards? Oh, I don't know, maybe foster care or public education. But this is exactly why many people, arguing from the pro-choice perspective, use the moniker of pro-birth for the pro-life position. Because pro-life would preclude that you care about life after it's born as well, not just before it begins, to have functioning consciousness as a person and is still developing cells at like a rapid rate. Pro-birth refers to that very same fact, that a lot of these pro-life people, they want every pregnancy to be carried to term, even by force, because that, pregnancy is a life that is more important than the sanctity of the life of the woman carrying it. But once that child is born, there are an insane amount of circumstances in which it can be put into to negatively impact its life, to not have a beneficial future without extreme adversity. And like many of the positions that I stated earlier, a lot of these pro-life people have no interest in benefiting the children after they're born. Take, for example, you force a woman who is a victim of sexual assault or is a victim of incest, and they have the child, right? There's a good chance that it's going to be very hard for them to be a productive mother, and instead of neglecting their child, they're going to put them up for adoption, and that should be understood. Now, why is it that many of these state legislatures are trying to make it harder for trans people or gay couples from adopting, or trying to prevent people of certain ethnic backgrounds from adopting? And even if you don't want to go that route, the underfunding of foster care and the undervetting of foster care, which is probably led to by a lack of funding for wages for these agents within foster care and social services, to be able to deem whether or not a home is truly going to be caring for this foster child. More tax funds are needed for that. But that's not going to happen under these same legislatures that are going to make it harder for more and more children that might end up in the system because of this. And public education, regularly we see states shoot down funding for public education, and a lot of that's through votes, but it's also votes in districts where there's an insane amount of conservative influence. So do you think that the lack of public education or lack of funding for public education is going to help improve these children's lives and their futures? I mean, once they're born, what? You don't care if they just like sit down and rot? Like, but I think we're all familiar with that at this point. So we've established that these pro-birth views don't really concern themselves with the quality of life of a child after they're born, especially if they're born poor. But what takes precedent above all of this is the quality of life for women and their protection to have bodily autonomy and the right to privacy under the law. This is what's really important in the pro-life, pro-choice debate. It's an extension of women's rights and equality in this country that is full of a lot of people who would rather have everyone forget just how recently women gained the rights to do a lot of things. Like the right to vote. You could look at the sexual revolution, the invention of birth control, Roe v. Wade, the 19th Amendment, the Fair Labor Standards Act. These are all fairly recent. And when considering just how long women have had an opportunity in this country to make their lives and their experiences become normalized and understood and part of how we govern, it's not a reality. That hasn't happened yet, and this is a clear attempt to prevent that from ever happening. But this video, it was more about the nature of the pro-life, pro-choice argument, the philosophical frameworks of it, and not the detailed history of the legal arguments. But I do plan in the future to talk a little bit more about some details about the leaked draft, about some specific contraceptive legislations like in Louisiana where I used to live, as well as what exactly the pro-choice neoliberal Democrat leadership exactly doing about this and how their inaction speaks louder than anything else. So thank you for watching. If you like the content and want to hear more of my analysis or my coverage of things happening, and if you enjoyed my take on that, even if you thought I was being a little bit of a nerd, which I am, go ahead and leave a like, a comment, whatever you want to do, and subscribe if you want to see more coverage or takes on things. I want to be consistent. I think about this stuff all the time. I write it down, but it's actually getting to make the video with a lot of stuff going on in my life that it takes some time sometimes. So I'm gonna try. That's all. I can try my best. I promise that. But again, thank you for watching, and remember, always value yourself. Peace.